Earlier today, Malawi held its breath, not in fear, but in focus. Cameras rolled, microphones blinked red, and the nation's heartbeat sank to one woman's voice. Justice Annabel Mtalimanja, the chairperson of the Malawi Electoral Commission. She stepped up to the podium with the calmness of a surgeon, steady, deliberate, aware that every syllable could ignite conversation from Blantyre to Karonga. Takala tikutsatira njira zolondola zovodera. Zosatira zikutsimikiziridwa, she declared. We have followed the right electoral procedures. The results are confirmed. And with that, democracy exhaled. But make no mistake, this was not just another announcement. It was the moment that defined the nation's political pulse. The briefing, titled MEC Press Briefing, KUULUTSA APHUNGU ONSE OMWE APAMBANA LERO Live, was more than formality. It was theater, tension, and transparency colliding on the same stage. For weeks, rumors had danced through WhatsApp groups and radio call-ins. Who would take the seats? Would the results be fair? Would MEC finally silence the whispers of manipulation that had haunted past elections? And when Mtalimanja raised that MEC folder, heavy with numbers and national expectation, you could almost feel the electricity hum through the Capitol. She read out names with precision, one after another. Each constituency a story of its own. Cheers erupted in some corners, silence in others. TikTok feeds flooded with live snippets. APAMBANA, MEC yatizonse zayendambwino. The people celebrating a system that, at least for one day, seemed to work. But beneath the order of the announcement lay 10 deeper truths, political, emotional, and historical. Truths that explain why this briefing hit differently. This is not just a recap, it's a revelation. Let's break down the 10 realities behind Annabel Mtalimanja's big moment, from power dynamics to public trust, from unity to unfinished wounds. In 2020, MEC's reputation was shaky, tainted by accusations of mismanagement, bias, and logistical chaos. But in 2025, something changed. Under Justice Annabel Mtalimanja, the Commission fought to regain the people's trust, not through slogans, but through structure. Mtalimanja herself, a no-nonsense legal mind with courtroom precision, became the quiet force reshaping perception. During the press briefing, she didn't beg for approval. She earned it. Dimadziwa kuti antu afuna tsawona, osati my excuses, she said firmly. We know people want truth, not excuses. That sentence, simple as it was, landed like thunder. For the first time in years, Malawians saw a MEC that looked in control. Results came faster. The tone was transparent. Even opposition monitors nodded as tallies matched their records. The live broadcast, streamed on MBC, Zodiac, and Facebook, felt like national therapy. Citizens flooded social media with rare optimism. Zikuoneka ngatintawi ino, MEC yagwiranticho mbwino. Annabel sanseka, koma anapangitsa antu kuseka. Translation: This time, MEC seems to have done its job right. Annabel didn't smile, but she made the nation smile. Mtalimanja's firm voice, neither emotional nor robotic, bridged the gap between authority and authenticity. It was the confidence Malawi didn't know it was craving. But why does this matter? Because after years of electoral skepticism, this moment restored something priceless: trust. Not blind trust, earned trust. And that's why this first chapter in the press briefing wasn't just numbers. It was redemption, institutional and emotional. Transition hook. But as every Malawian knows, where there's light, there's shadow. If trust was reborn today, the next truth reveals who almost killed it. While the cameras were focused on Justice Annabel Mtalimanja, make no mistake, the shadows in the room had their own agenda. Politics never misses a show, especially when power is on the line. Behind the calm podium, every line she read, every number announced carried weight, not just statistically, but politically. MEC wasn't merely confirming who won, it was quietly determining who survived. Multiple sources hinted that representatives from rival blocs, DPP, MCP, and UTM, were watching closely, eyes darting, waiting for even the slightest slip. The room was full, but the silence was sharp enough to cut through concrete. One reporter whispered, "Ay como LERO antu awa alindima nerves." Translation: today, these politicians are on edge. Because let's be honest, trust in Malawi's elections hasn't been a free gift. It's been earned through scars. From the annulled 2019 election to the heated rerun of 2020, MEC had been a battlefield in itself. This briefing was not just administrative, it was atonement. But you could sense the tension behind the professionalism. Some politicians, especially those expecting upsets, exchanged glances like poker players waiting for a turn of fate. Their phones buzzed nonstop, group chats exploding, regional chiefs demanding updates, supporters pacing outside. And yet, through all that political pressure, Mtalimanja didn't flinch. Her tone stayed steel solid. Tikuyimira chowono, osati jipani. We stand for truth, not parties. In a country where every statement gets spun, that one sliced through propaganda like a hot knife through encima. Still, the bigger story wasn't what was said, it was what was unsaid. There were rumors that certain regional politicians had tried to negotiate early access to results, a quiet reminder that the game of influence never sleeps. But MEC didn't blink. Not this time. While the press room buzzed with microphones and formalities, the real verdict was being written outside, in the streets, the minibus stops, and the markets. Because in Malawi, politics doesn't just happen in parliament, it happens in the people's mouths. From Blantyre to Mzuzu, from Sanje to Nkata Bay, people gathered around radios, glued to their phones, refreshing Facebook Live every 5 seconds. You could almost hear the collective heartbeat of a nation trying to read between the lines. When Annabel Mtalimanja read the final list of winning MPs, the reaction was instant. Some danced, some cried, some shouted, "Pamenepa Mek yagwira nchito bwino kwambiri," which means, this time, Mek has done a great job. But others were cautious. One vendor in Limbe said, "Takala tikumva zintu zambiri, komantawe eno tiona ngati zintu zisinta," which means, we've heard these things before, let's see if change really comes this time. It wasn't blind faith, it was hope with scars. That's what made this briefing powerful. It wasn't just numbers, it was narrative. Each name Mtalimanja announced carried a ripple effect into the villages, into conversations at barbershops, into WhatsApp groups flooded with emojis and memes. Malawians have always had a unique brand of democracy, loud, emotional, and beautifully chaotic. And today proved it again. Whether it was women ululating in cheu or border riders honking in celebration, the street made it clear. The people were listening. "Tikufuna chitukuko, osati mapromise oka," shouted one man outside Zodiac Studios, which means, we want development, not just promises. It was a simple message wrapped in humor and exhaustion. The people had spoken in their own way, not through violence, not through anger, but through joy and scrutiny. And maybe, just maybe, that's what democracy looks like when it grows up.
If you thought the MEC press briefing was calm, organized, and uneventful, think again. Behind those polished statements and polite claps, there was a storm quietly brewing. A power struggle so subtle you'd miss it if you blinked. Because, let's be honest, politics in Malawi never sleeps. Every result sheet, every regional tally is a potential chess move. And in that moment, Justice Annabel Mtalimanja wasn't just reading data. She was balancing power. Sources close to the commission whispered that in the days leading up to the announcement, phone calls were flying faster than campaign posters before election week. Pressure lines from political parties, subtle suggestions, quiet reminders, and not-so-innocent requests. One insider put it bluntly, MEC idakalangati nyama pakati panjala ziwiri. MEC became meat between two hungry lions. You could almost feel it in the air that day. Representatives from major parties, DPP, MCP, UTM, filled the moon, sitting upright, pretending to smile, but their eyes told another story. Every word from Mtalimanja's mouth carried the weight of possible political backlash. But Mtalimanja, cool as a Lake Malawi breeze at dawn. She didn't stutter, didn't flinch, didn't even blink too long. She simply said, Tikwi miradziko, osati muntu. We stand for the nation, not for individuals. And that's when everyone in the room realized this was a different MEC. No political strings, no favors, just constitutional backbone and quiet defiance. Still, the tension lingered. After the briefing, whispers spread that certain party officials weren't too happy with the tone. Too confident, they said. Too independent. But that's exactly what democracy needed. A commission that fears no politician. Transition hook? Yet even as the halls echoed with control and courage, something darker was emerging outside. A war of perception. Welcome to Fact 5, the media storm. Truth, spin, and social fireworks.
If you thought the MEC briefing ended when Justice Annabel Mtalimanja put down her folder, think again. In 2025, no story ends at the podium. It starts on the internet. Within minutes of her final statement, Malawi's digital universe exploded. Facebook Lives, TikTok reactions, WhatsApp voice notes, everyone suddenly became a political analyst, a journalist, and a comedian rolled into one. Masikya tunuka ndifaya LERO, one user posted. Annabel Mtalimanja ndiye definition ya calm under pressure, another commented. And of course, someone added, Tikufuna Misik version 2.0 for 2029, Osati Madrama. But not everyone was celebrating. Opposition accounts spun different angles, claiming favoritism and missing tallies, despite Misik publishing transparent figures on its site. Hashtags trended faster than a fuel price increase. Hashtag MEC Briefing 2025. Hashtag Annabel the Iron Judge. Hashtag Vote Counts. And the spicy one, hashtag Misik Yalira. Misik has spoken. It was democracy in 4G. News outlets joined the fray too. Zodiac, NBC, and Times TV battled for exclusive interviews, while international outlets framed it as Malawi's moment of electoral maturity. Yet amid all that noise, Mtalimanja's message remained crisp. In her closing line, she said, Zoonadi zidajikasikitsa zoka, ife tinangavunitsa zomwe anthu anasankha. Truth stabilizes itself. We only reveal what the people decided. That quote went viral. It wasn't dramatic, but it was powerful. The kind of phrase that becomes a national mantra. Even memes popped up, of her face next to captions like, Annabel doesn't argue, she announces. Still, the internet storm had a double edge. While it amplified transparency, it also fueled misinformation. Fake result screenshots spread faster than official MEC updates. Some pages even tried to claim exclusive leaks. And that's where Mtalimanja's calm authority became critical. She didn't chase the noise, she silenced it by staying consistent. Transition hook. But if social media was on fire, the next battlefield was real, the economy. Because Fact 6 reveals what happens after the applause fades, the aftermath, what these results mean for Malawi's future. When the lights dimmed and the MEC press briefing wrapped up, it wasn't the end, it was the beginning of Malawi's next chapter. Because every election, no matter how clean or calm, leaves one question echoing across the nation. So, now what? The morning after Annabel Mtalimanja's announcement, Malawi woke up different. Markets opened cautiously. Bank analysts on ZBS radio whispered about post-election adjustments. The kwacha wobbled slightly, not from chaos, but from anticipation. For once, it wasn't political violence shaking the economy, it was uncertainty wrapped in peace. And that alone was progress. One vendor in Blantyre put it perfectly. Ntawizina, kusamba zipolowe ndiye titukuko. Sometimes, the absence of gunfire is progress itself. The calm after the announcement gave people a strange, quiet hope. Foreign embassies issued statements praising the transparency, while neighboring countries watched with cautious admiration. Malawi has once again proven that democracy can be done right, said one AU observer. But beneath the applause, deeper concerns lingered. Would the new MPs live up to their promises? Would policy follow the people's priorities or just the politicians' convenience? Because the truth is, elections don't fix nations, leadership does. And that's where Malawi's story gets complicated. Economists predicted tough months ahead. Inflation control, youth unemployment, and corruption reforms, all riding on the backs of those freshly announced winners. For many citizens, the briefing wasn't just about who won, but who would deliver. Still, one thing stood out. For the first time in a while, people believed that institutions could work without burning down. Mtalimanja's MEC had set the bar higher: professionalism, speed, and quiet authority. As one man on NBC's call-in show said, "Tikufuna zikale chizolowezi, osati chozidzwisa." We want this to be normal, not a miracle. But not everyone was ready to move on. Because in the shadows of this calm, another conversation was rising, one about gender, power, and perception. Welcome to Fact 7, the Iron Lady of MEC, Annabel Mtalimanja, and the power of female leadership. There's something poetic about watching a woman command a room full of politicians, not with shouting, not with theatrics, but with presence. Justice Annabel Mtalimanja didn't need to wave her hands or raise her voice. Her authority came in silence, in sentences carefully weighed, in eyes that said, "Don't test me." In a country where leadership is still often defined by male voices and old political habits, Mtalimanja's composure was revolutionary. She didn't just represent MEC, she embodied institutional strength wrapped in grace. During the briefing, one journalist quietly murmured, "Uyu ndi Margaret Thatcher wa Malawi." This is Malawi's own Margaret Thatcher. Of course, Mtalimanja wouldn't claim that title. Her style was less iron fist and more surgical precision. Every phrase was deliberate. "Tikuchitira dzikolino ulemu," she said, "we act with respect for this nation." It wasn't just what she said, it was how she said it. Calm, factual, measured, like someone who knew she was walking through political minefields and refused to step wrong. Social media picked up on it immediately. TikTok was flooded with clips of her pausing between statements, the Mtalimanja look, they called it, the exact moment she'd glance down at her notes before delivering another decisive line. Memes called her Madam MEC, the nation's new queen of cool. But behind the praise was something deeper: inspiration. For young girls across Malawi, seeing a woman lead such a tense national moment wasn't just political representation, it was personal validation. It said, you can lead, you can decide, you can own the mic. And in that quiet symbolism, Mtalimanja changed more than headlines. She shifted the cultural ceiling. But as the applause for female leadership echoed online, another group wasn't smiling.
those who lost their parliamentary dreams overnight. Let's step into Fact 8, the loser's lament, political shockwaves, and silent tears.
For every name that Mtalimanja proudly announced as APAMBANA, there was another name sitting in silence, staring at a phone that would never ring. The victory cheers outside MEC headquarters, they echoed like thunder through the quiet homes of the defeated. Politics in Malawi has always been an emotional sport. Losing an election isn't just about numbers, it's about pride, reputation, and that sudden emptiness when the phone stops buzzing. For some candidates, it felt less like a result and more like a personal funeral. One candidate from the central region told the nation off record, "Tinalimbana ndimvula, dzua, komanso mapromise andalama, komatsopano antoanga achedwa kuyanka." We fought through rain, sun, and promises of money. Now my own supporters are quiet. The silence was deafening. Facebook became a confession booth. Some posted polite concession statements, "We respect the will of the people." Others, not so much. One viral post read, "Zaboza izi, mavote anga anasoa panjila." This is lies. My votes disappeared on the way. Meanwhile, supporters were split. The diehards refused to believe their candidate had lost. "Make your chita set up," they muttered. Others took the loss with humor, creating memes of politicians packing faster than an Airtel data bundle. But behind the laughter was heartbreak. For many, campaigns meant selling assets, taking loans, and sacrificing years of preparation, only for it all to vanish in one afternoon. Still, Justice Mtalimanja had warned beforehand, "Mavote simasewa, antu ansangapo, ife timanga werenga." Elections are not a game. People choose. We only count. And she was right. Politics may bruise egos, but it's the people's voice that wins. Transition hook. But if the losers were licking their wounds, the winners were already celebrating, sometimes a little too loudly. Get ready for Fact 9. From victory to vanity, the winner's parade and political overconfidence.
When MEC Chair Annabel Mtalimanja read the last name, the air outside exploded. Drums, ululations, vuvuzelas, the whole 9 yards. Malawi loves a winner, and the newly elected MPs were quick to remind everyone that, yes, they had arrived. For many of them, celebrations started faster than Parliament's clock. Convoys revved through townships, flags waved from car windows, and Facebook flooded with photos captioned, "The people have spoken, Titokoze Mulungu," which means, "Thank God for the people's voice." Some even hosted impromptu parades before officially being sworn in. It was democracy turned festival, colorful, loud, and beautifully Malawian. But buried beneath all that joy was a quiet warning. Victory is not immunity. A few winners already started showing the early symptoms of political amnesia, forgetting the markets they once promised to rebuild or the schools they vowed to visit. One man from Chinji joked, "Akatenga seat, amaiwala bench," which means once they get the seat, they forget the bench they came from. Yet not all were swept up in vanity. Some humbled MPs, especially new faces, gave emotional speeches about service, not status. "I'm not here to be served," said one independent candidate. "I'm here to serve." Those words earned real applause online. Meanwhile, Mtalimanja, ever composed, ended her briefing with quiet grace. "Kugonjetsa di chiyambi," or Satima Peto, which means victory is the beginning, not the end. But that line seemed lost on a few winners already printing T-shirts with their faces. And that's the irony of democracy. The closer you get to power, the easier it is to drift from purpose. The MEC announcement crowned new leaders, yes, but it also tested who among them remembered why they were chosen. When the cameras shut off and the podium stood empty, something deeper lingered in the air. Not noise, not tension, but reflection. Because this wasn't just a political event, it was a mirror moment for an entire nation. Malawi has been through storms, disputed elections, economic frustration, political betrayals. But this briefing marked a quiet, symbolic victory, not just for winners or losers, but for the system itself. For once, democracy didn't need bodyguards. It just needed microphones and truth. Annabel Mtalimanja's steady composure symbolized something greater, the idea that leadership doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers with authority. Her phrase, "Zunari zimatsikazi kitsazoka," truth stabilizes itself, became more than a statement. It became a national mood. And across the country, people began to feel that shift. In homes, in offices, even in minibuses, you could hear a cautious pride. Takala tikodabwa ntawi zambili. Komantawi ino mek yachita bueno. We've doubted many times before, but this time Mek did well. For a moment, unity didn't come from politics, it came from trust. But let's be clear, Malawi still has a mountain to climb. Poverty, corruption, youth unemployment, these won't vanish with one press briefing. Yet what happened at Mek that day proved one powerful truth. Institutions can change the story if people demand better and leaders listen. Maybe that's the real victory, not who got the seat, but who finally earned respect for the process. Justice Annabel Mtalimanja closed her speech by saying, "Dziko limene limamvamao antuake, limakala nditsogolo." A nation that listens to its people has a future. And for a country often battered by broken promises, that sounded less like politics and more like hope. But the question remains, will Malawi protect this fragile trust or let it fade like campaign posters in the rain? Let's wrap it all together in the final call to action. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was Malawi's moment of truth, literally. A day when microphones carried integrity instead of propaganda. When Justice Annabel Mtalimanja stood firm, calm, and unshaken while the nation watched. When Mek didn't just count votes, it counted on trust. Because in the end, democracy isn't measured by how loud politicians speak. It's measured by how confidently citizens believe. This press briefing wasn't perfect, no democracy ever is. But for once, it felt different. The process was clean, the leadership steady, and the people engaged. It was a small, shining reminder that in a continent often scarred by election drama, Malawi can still be the headline that reads, "It can be done right." You see, leadership is not about who gets the chair. It's about who protects the table. And this time, Mtalimanja protected it. From political pressure, media chaos, and even public doubt. And maybe, just maybe, this is the beginning of something bigger. Because every nation that grows strong first learns to listen, and every citizen who demands accountability writes the next chapter of their democracy. So as the dust settles, remember this: democracy doesn't end when the results are read. It begins when we decide to keep watching, questioning, and believing. Tsono a Malawi, let's keep that energy alive.